Welcome to A Slice of Therapy. This podcast was created with Anchor. And if you've not heard of Anchor, let me explain. It's free. It's a really easy way to make a podcast. And it helps me because I can just do this every day directly into my phone, because there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. So if you fancy making a podcast too, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. So I want to tell you about a guy named Greg McKeown. And Greg is a writer, and he's also an essentialist. In fact, the book that he wrote is called Essentialism. And what an essentialist is somebody who focuses, or someone who is interested in the kind of commitments that we take on board in life, the kind of ways that we can commit ourselves to things, maybe because we've just got 1,000,001 projects that we're interested in, but also interested as well in the kind of commitments that other people have for us that we say yes to, even though we're not that keen. And the problem with both of these approaches is that we can often bring ourselves into a state of overwhelm. And the finite time that we have, time's a funny thing, isn't it? Because it's not like money. You could have £10 in your pocket and just never spend it for years and years and years, but you can't do that with time. Time just gets spent, doesn't it? Every second of it. And then the next one, and then the next one. And so what he's kind of interested in, what this idea of essentialism is interested in, is how we spend that finite amount of time. Because we're spending it every second. So how are we spending it? And a lot of us are spending it in ways that don't really press our buttons in a fun way. We're doing a lot of stuff that we'd rather not be doing. And quite a lot of that stuff is other people's agendas for us, where we've said yes to things more out of politeness than because we wanted to do it. And then sooner or later we look at how our time is spent. And it's a very unexciting way to spend it. No wonder then that many of us start feeling overwhelmed or even down or flat about the life that we're living sometimes. And so what essentialism talks about is making sure that you have as much of your life as possible with the stuff that you really value. And so he has a test basically where you might look at something that might or might not be in your life at the moment and just say, out of 100, how important is this? How joyous is this? How essential is this to be in your life? How much do you want this to be in your life? And he says that, anything over 90% keep, but anything less than 90% deserves a second look and may even be something that you would decide that you would kind of get rid of. And I'm sure, I recognise that. I recognise that there's things in life that I'm kind of like, okay then. Well, what the writer Derek Sivers talks about, which is very similar to this, is the idea of, is something a hell yes? So when an opportunity comes up or somebody asks you something or makes a request or you have an idea yourself, in response to that, does every fibre of your being go, hell yes? Yes, I really want to do that. Because what Derek Sivers says is that it's either a hell yes or a no. And from a very similar vantage point, what they're both arguing there, you see, is anything which isn't a hell yes, anything which isn't a 90% plus, might well be something that we would decide to not do after all. So that this finite amount of time that we have is going to be spent filled with stuff that is a hell yes. Now, I wonder what difference that would make in your life if your life was filled with stuff that gave you that level of excitement. That your focus and your attention and your time was always spent on things that really engaged you, really energized you, really was important to you, that you really valued and gave you joy. And so I thought I'd pass that on because it's an interesting one. And he's not saying that there's any strict rule to this. You know, you might say, well, this is an 80%. You might decide to keep it after all. But it's certainly, this exercise certainly gets you in touch with those things where your response is anything but hell yes. Where you're kind of doing it, but bleh. You know that feeling, bleh. All right then, I'll do that. Now that's not something that's really going to spark us up in a state of joy or a state of heightened engagement with life, excitement with life. And so if we want to feel excited with life rather than blur, it can be helpful sometimes to look at the content of life and see if we can kind of prune it. And those things which aren't really adding value to us, we can maybe replace with something that is. So if you find these ideas useful in this episode, please share them so somebody else can as well. If you'd like to work with me one-on-one, I'm Alun Parry. You'll find me at liverpoolpsychotherapy.co.uk. If you want to subscribe to the podcast, it's completely free, so please do wherever you get yours. And if you prefer to watch them on YouTube, just go to asliceoftherapy.com and that takes you directly to the YouTube channel. So thanks for listening, and I'll be back again tomorrow with another one.